Welcome to the fifth roundtable on the two sessions in China. Hello and welcome to the roundtable on China's two sessions in 2019. And because the second session of the 13th National People's Congress has wrapped up earlier this morning, and that also means this will be our very last time for this roundtable. So for our viewers who show great interest and to watch our show, live streaming and content, you can follow us on all the platforms of CGTN. That being said, including CGTN app, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and also Sina Weibo. And also you can find this live streaming available on CRI or on the Facebook and Twitter account of CRI, which is called China Plus News. Well, before we get started, let me introduce the three gentlemen who I feel so honored that joining us today. The first is John Gerrich, who's the reporter from CGTN Digital. You're so lucky you got the best qualities of you demonstrated in your last name, being good and being rich, right?
It's a popular name in China, yeah. People seem to love it.
Yeah, that's so cool. And Nathan Kin, who is the reporter from CGT America, thank you so much for flying all the way from DC to cover this political event.
It's been great.
And our frequent guest for this roundtable, Mr. Luo Laiming, who's a reporter for CRI, China Radio International.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for coming, gentlemen. Well, today we'll be focusing on opening up because this is the policy that not only drives China's growth in the past 40 years, but also it's one of the major buzzwords for the two sessions this time. So I guess you've been hearing a lot about the discussions on that in the past 2 weeks, right? So first of all, because we know China has been implemented this policy for 40 years, when we talk about opening up, it usually comes with reform. So for me and Laiming, because we were born and raised in China, and we're born after the 1980s. So
you're millennials?
Yeah, we are.
Wow.
Luckily. That also means, the opening up, when we first opened the door to the outside world, the first change is we got more options, right?
Yeah, a lot more options.
I want to show you something here. It's the Coke. Because when we were raised, Coke has become very popular. It's the regular Coke, the Diet Coke, and there's a Zero. But I still remember when I first went to the United States when I was younger, I was so overwhelmed by the different choices, the different flavors of Coke. Because at the time we only have the regular Coke and the Diet Coke. In the States they have the cherry Coke, vanilla, a lot. And also for the ice cream. At that time maybe China only have chocolate, vanilla. And that's it. But in the States they have 31. Right? 31, like ice cream, 31.
Are you better off with 31 flavors? That's what
I think it's always better to have different choices.
The illusion of choice, they call it.
No, I love it. The more the better. What about you, Luo?
For everyone.
Yeah, I know, because you were raised in a medium-sized city in China. So have you witnessed this kind of changes brought up by this policy of opening up in the past years?
My folks will be so happy when you call it a medium-sized city, but really it is just a tiny township tucked away in the mountains. And it was until I think in 2002 and 2003, I'm not sure which one, that we had our first traffic light in our town. I remember as a kid, as a high school kid, being naughty as we were, me and a bunch of our boys, we began up the first night when we had the traffic light. We made a point of waiting before the light turns red, so we could run our red light for the first time in our lives. Now I realize this is probably not the thing we say on record, but I assume it's going to be a very typical example to show how isolated that is before this thing. At least when I was born, actually the reform and opening up has been going on for some time now, but it takes a while before we could feel the influence, at least in that part of the country.
But now, how about now? Do you still go back home every year? And
last time I went home, it was October 2018, and the city is 6 times bigger than I used to know it. And as a boy, I was used to walking to the parents of my fathers, walking to the home of my mom's parents, walking to the homes of my uncles, aunties, on both sides. So it was not until I had to go to high school when I was allowed to ride a bicycle. Now, I think last time in October 2018, there were a lot of cars around, and I don't feel like I would like to raise my kid there. Because when I was a kid, I was allowed to go to school by myself and go back from school. Yeah, that freedom. Because everyone rode bicycles. Now there were a lot of cars, and the one thing I can remember going home, traveling on the car was when I was looking at the city. There's a feeling that there's a landscape there, looking at the apartment buildings, residential buildings.
It is a city now. It is no longer like a remote small village.
Yeah, 20 to 25.
Traffic lights.
A lot more actually.
And the boys never run towards it anymore.
Well, some would say they will still give a try. I mean, at least my grandmother, it could take her another few years before she gets used to it.
Cool.
Well,
I would say.
That's what lovely stories.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Nathan, what was your first time to be here in China?
Well, I was as a kid in Hong Kong. My dad did business there, but actually officially in China about 8 years ago, and before even this building was built. When everything was based on the other side of the city.
Right.
And even then, no one had heard of WeChat 8 years ago.
No, we use text to send
exactly.
messages.
I mean, texting was here, and you could see that China was growing fast.
Right.
And again, there were more bikes around, even though you didn't have mobike. Exactly, but now the bikes have become mobike.
You have mobike in DC. It's not only in China.
Actually, they just pulled back. Now they've won the war over OFO.
Right,
The expansion is over. It's really interesting how that war played out. But it was still a wonderful city. But actually, I see less and less of the old Beijing every time I come back, and more of the new. And I think there's a certain generation. They're usually taxi drivers who miss the old Beijing.
Right.
But you see so many young people. So many artistic, creative people
like
who, of course, that just really love the dramatic changes that the new China and the reform and opening up is bringing, and that I find infectious every time I come here.
Wow, that's amazing. John, you're a newcomer to China, if I remember correctly.
Relatively new, yeah. I've been coming for about 5 years and living here for 3 years.
Cool.
So yeah, I think we see the same kind of changes every time you come back. Is buildings and the whole cityscape changes.
Yeah.
What I think is, I think I see the difference now, having lived here for 3 years, through my family or my friends who come and visit, and they'll be surprised and shocked. They'll go into San Leten or shopping area in Beijing, and they'll see all the stores they see in London or Staines or anywhere in the UK.
Got Pizza Express now.
Exactly,
Great.
Yeah. And
Still, you have Pizza Express here in Beijing.
We started in London, and it was a treat as a kid, and now they've got one in China World Mall. And
are you still going there?
Oh, I had pizza here. It was like going back to my childhood.
Great,
Garlic doughballs and Pizza Express were a legendary thing as I was growing up.
Exactly. It was a real treat.
We still have them, yeah.
And also because of this opening up, do you feel like you become more, it's not only welcome, it's like people, they feel more used to having foreigners. I remember when I was younger, every time I see a foreigner, I just keep staring at them. And some of the people, like the strangers, they start to touching them because they have longer hair or what. But now I think when you walk on the streets, people don't pay extra attention to you. They will still feel, welcome, but you feel like normal people in here, right? It's not like 20 years ago, you were like,
The first time I came, people would look at you more, but now people come up and chat because they know you speak English. So if they want to practice English, especially in rural areres, I had this wonderful spring festival where we followed a migrant worker back to his village, and they did the whole pig thing with they slaughtered the pig, and the whole village came, and we were part of that. It was really, really wonderful. But I remember one young girl, she must have been about 8 or 9. And she just saw me speaking English, and she just followed me around all the time, trying to practice English, trying to sing songs. I taught her songs, and that was really great. You could, long way away from Chengdu, high up in the hills, but she really was the next generation who you could see that her eyes, even though she loved her family and loved the feast and everything, her eyes were on the horizon, and it was really cool.
That's very interesting. You should travel to my hometown because we could use a few foreigners there.
That's a deal. Sign a contract after this.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll write it down.
And there's nothing like going back to a hometown for Spring Festival, and we were made to be so welcome. I mean, the butcher came and slaughtered the pig, and within 3 hours we were eating some of that meat while the bacon is smoking for the next 6 months, and it was just an unforgettable experience. Yeah,
it is. But it's not only the what we have before that's dominating our memory of this opening up thing. It's actually dominating the talks during the 2 sessions the past 2 weeks, right, Nathan? You've been talking to a lot of NPC deputies and CPPCC members. Is this one of the most frequent words that pop out during your conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a foreigner, I live in Washington, D.C., so I live and breathe the trade talks and the trade conflicts and all this sort of stuff. So reform and opening up, and its interpretation by what it means in Beijing, within Beijing and in Washington and the rest of the world is something that you could talk about for hours and hours. But what's been really interesting for me is watching the passage of the foreign investment law, talking to foreign companies based here in Beijing, what they want to see, talk to Europeans, others, about implementation, about enforcement, what China wants from the rest of the world as well. And, the two sessions have really been allowed me, as someone who lives in Washington, to see Chinese policy being made in the microscope. And, the Western criticism is the NPC is a rubber stamp. But, you see the debate in the hall.
You see it. You were sitting in there.
Yeah, well, not just in the hall, but it's in the corridors where people give their interpretations and different interest groups, whether they be provincial or in Beijing, whether they be in finance, whether they be in extraction, in coal or steel. All of them are inputting into this.
Yeah.
And, so it's a consensus thing, which with input, of course, from domestic, first of all, but also a lot of international players as well. And everyone I've spoken to has had something to say that goes into this new law. So it's really interesting.
So,
actually, sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the most interesting things I thought about Premier Li Keqiang's press conference today.
Okay. No, let's save it for a little later because I want to talk about the work report. Save it for the best. Because before the press conference, there was this, during the opening session, Premier Li Keqiang delivered the work report, right? The government work report. And he mentioned opening up lots of times. Do you want to take a guess? How many times?
27.
Close enough.
24.
Yes, 24 times. Oh, because you know it. You know your thing. Okay, John. So, yeah, among those 24 times. Okay, now I'll give you a chance to talk. Which one struck you the most about opening up?
Well, what I was going to say was that...
Number 12.
Number 14, yeah.
Well done.
What I found really interesting, just to go back to Nathan's point, was that he mentioned a lot today, and we'll come back to it, I know.
Right.
He mentioned a lot that he was about talking to NPC deputies or CPPCC members or to businesses. It was like a real message of, I'm listening to what you're saying and we're acting on what you're telling us. And that goes for the foreign investment law as well. Foreign companies have been for a long time have been operating in China happily, and also making certain criticisms of what they'd like to improve. And I thought what we were hearing is that China and what Premier Li was saying was, we're listening to what you're saying and we're going to act on it. And I found that really interesting because it really ties into the way Western politics works, the narrative of Western politics, of a listening politician.
Yeah, I was with the European Chamber today, talking to them their reaction to the investment law, and we're going to have a story tomorrow on the whole thing. And they were saying, they put a lot of input into what they felt their member countries and also companies that are being based here. And there was one article, Article 40, which they were really worried about, and they're still worried about, which is basically China is able to take retaliation if countries impose tariffs or laws they don't like outside of the WTO and stuff, so they need clarification on that. But what's really interesting is this debate is happening out in the open in Beijing, and it's happening during the two sessions. It's a back and forth, it's healthy, it's more transparent. And every time I come back to the two sessions, I think this is my third one, you see more of this. And I think a lot of it was there before, but not in English. And a lot of the documents now are in English, online very quickly. Xinhua's English delivery is much quicker than it was. So I feel that I'm getting much more of a vantage point to be able to see the sausages being made, the laws being made.
That's true. Sorry, because I talked to many NPC deputies, CPPCC members. I think they're also very impressed with the opening up policy. It's not only about the like the old one we have, which is mainly about open the door wider and wider. When I talk to them, they say they are very impressed with what the premier put, as he said, all-round opening up. So actually, in the report, he said we will promote the all-round opening up and foster the new strengths in the international economic cooperation and competition.
All-round means what to you? Because some of these phrases, it's difficult to hold on to.
All-round means a lot to us, right? Because first of all, it's not only to open up in a certain sector, it's actually all-round open up. It opened up to many sectors, especially for some of the sectors that we're very sensitive, that we don't want to open up: automobile, manufacturing, finance services. Actually, before the two-session kicks off, I talked to the S&P global ratings because of this new policy. Then because before, for those rating agencies, if they want to found a company here in China, they have to be started or built in a way of joint venture.
That's right.
Now they can have their fully foreign-owned license. which is S&P is doing it. So they're now making the preparing work, and actually started.
The European Chamber today, when I was talking to them,
yeah.
you know, there's this negative list, right, which is like basically all countries have this. It's a list of businesses that we don't really want foreign interferences. A lot of it is extraction industries and stuff like that, you know, oil, big banks and all that sort of stuff. Guess what the Europeans said to me was the one business they really wanted to be in that was on the negative list? Cloud computing. I thought it was going to be something else. I thought it was going to be finance, although it's not on that.
Or services.
Exactly, but it's cloud computing.
Wow.
Which is really interesting.
Is it about sharing the big data? Or?
It's data, you know, what's happening in Guizhou, all this, you know, foreign companies really want to be a part of it. And because you have 1.3 billion people here, well, before, you know, the amount of data that you get on consumers is just unparalleled anywhere in the world. And I was really surprised by that.
Right.
But didn't they just pass a regulation on personal data protection for sort of making sure that individuals, they have the right to their own data, and if they want to share of our data or our cloud technology,
there's a huge debate between.
It's kind of a little complicated.
Yeah, Facebook's turning into WeChat. That's the headline too. I mean, honestly, that's what's happening right now. You know, they have a big problem, and you know where WeChat, you basically have you're in your group, but you don't share with everyone else.
No.
Whereas on Facebook, on your newsfeed, lots of people can see it, but you haven't even invited into that group. And so all the privacy concerns, all the fake news concerns, all the rumours that happened during the last election and stuff. Mark Zuckerberg is now, actually there's 2 people left Facebook last 2 days, and they are going to move towards a WeChat model where, like in WeChat, you are in control of who you communicate with, and that's really interesting.
I thought they walk away because they had this technology glitch yesterday or the day before.
Well,
but I think the Zuckerberg blog post was a week ago, and it was it's about closing off your information so you can choose who you share with, and moving away from the kind of open sharing, which made Facebook its name really. It's a really interesting change.
And I think it's indicative. You know, you have the WeChat model. And I spent days with WeChat a few years ago, and it just blew my mind. And then you have the Facebook model. And both of them reflect the different societies. And I think if you can find a happy medium, it's going to be really interesting.
And it's about like after you open up, you integrate, right? You take the best from other companies or the parties, and then we become better. Like we all better off. Maybe that's the beauty of it, right?
I'm just a bit worried that whether WeChat will complain that Facebook took their IP. But it was the other way around.
That's another totally different issue.
I'm just saying, you know, let's not go there. Okay. Too early? Too soon?
Too soon, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the sharing, I mean, this is a huge part of China opening up, is the sharing of ideas to make China's economy better with the input of foreign companies, and to make companies overseas better because Chinese companies are going there and sharing their expertise. It's what it's all about. And by passing the foreign investment law, it's a signal that that's the direction China's going in. And now we've got to see how it's implemented, which is another concern I guess the European Chamber probably brought up. Yeah, it's what happens next, which really
matters. And their position is, if Chinese companies are competitive in China with foreign competition, then they'll be globally competitive. So the way a lot of these you know, foreign companies and entities sell it is say, look, if you're competitive with us on your home turf, just think how competitive you'll be globally. So you see what I mean? It's if you don't get China on board, then there's no point. So a lot of this is sort of back and forth of ideas. But of course, every country has their national interests. Everyone has their domestic lobbies, domestic constituencies. You know, there are only 50,000 coal miners in the US. There are 180,000 people who install solar panels. But Donald Trump backed coal, so because of where they are politically on the map. So it's very interesting, and you have the same dynamics in China too.
My concern about the reference to opening up in the government work report would be the part about opening up the financial sector. I mean, I'm not exactly an expert in finance, but I've read the news and realized maybe in the past few years, China has been engaged in a years-long campaign to sort of diffuse the systemic risk in the financial sector. And even today, in the government work report, and also in the Premier's speech earlier on today, we saw reference to, let's say, local government's debt, that sort of thing. So my concern would be, are we ready there yet? to open up the sector to more challenges from, let's say, more competition from foreign investors? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there'll never be a time when we are ready.
Right,
when
we
we're
have
ready.
to.
When
Sometimes when we're there, maybe we just need to push them to speed up this process. Maybe I think that's right.
Capital is really interesting. The more liberal capital markets, more liberal capital markets means money gets cheaper generally, because people compete over the over different projects, and you know, if you have a good project, you get more capital. Basically, the right money finds the right company.
Yeah.
In a system, and the US is not, but the US is not immune to this. I'm not pointing fingers here, but in a system which picks winners and losers, capital is never efficient, and that's the argument. Is China spending more money funding companies than companies are providing in profits?
Very interesting. I am also interested, though, into whether the introduction of more foreign investment into the Chinese market, whether this is going to be change the way tech companies operate here in this country. Because back a few years ago, when many of the internet platforms, when they prospered, they sort of they were operating on a system where they burned investment from, let's say, angel investors, sort of to get users attracted to the platform, and then after they get people hooked up to the system, they raise the price a little. It happened to the movie tickets system, I mean, Mao Yan or Damai, the systems, whereas previous years you had like 20 yuan a ticket, and then
it's going to happen with Uber and Lyft and Didi, you know, I mean, it happens, Get market share, dominate the market, hike the price up, and it's basically you're renting.
Yeah, I suppose
it's rents.
The reason why Uber lost and withdrew from the market was, I suppose, they lost in the cash burning game. And then, I wonder whether new investment coming to the market is going to change how, whether this cash burning strategy is going to work.
I see it positively. You know, if you're having so many unicorns in China, maybe there could be more unicorns if there's more capital. If capital is competing against capital to create the industries of the future, that's not bad. The problem is that everyone has to be quicker, faster, leaner, and you know, that's a difficult jump to take. Like you said, you know, it's hard to commit, but once you're committed, you know, you become better, fitter, more nimble, but it's difficult, and there are vested interests. I mean, it's the finance sector. I mean, you have that on Wall Street. Why don't you're going to have it in Wuhan too?
Right.
What has been the domestic reaction to the foreign investment law? We know generally overseas it's been seen as a step forward. It's been encouraging, but how's the reaction been in China with Chinese businesses?
I haven't done any interviews, but as an individual human being living in this country, I feel like this is a strong signal for the domestic market as much as it is for the foreign market, in the sense that I think previously there have been reports about maybe some voices showing that maybe we don't need as many foreign investment coming from the outside, because now that we are switching to a consumption-based economy where we basically can make very good use of domestic investment to begin with, and now with this foreign investment law coming out, we sort of get a strong message that maybe that's not the way to go forward. We still need foreign investment coming in. We still need new ideas, innovative ideas to change the game.
You know, zombie banks, right? We've heard this both in the US and here, where basically they're you have had a massive infrastructure boom here. Right, where the money has been easy and the projects have been built, but the returns aren't always there yet. But if China moves, as it is, moving up the quality in terms of how the economy is based in more service-based, I think actually you even need more capital, because it has to be diversified a lot more. You need a lot more players. You need a lot more analysts.
Nathan, I don't agree. I don't think it's only about the capital. As John asked, I think for those Chinese companies of different sizes, this is a strong warning, or this is a strong signal for them to tell them that you need to be more competitive. You cannot be always so protected, overprotected, where you just get used to, compete in a certain play field. You have to be someday, like we have have to grow up, right? We have to be in the market. We have to compete with each other.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying.
So this is a push-up. I think it's push-up, and this is going to hurt. Of course. Will it be painful? Of course. At the beginning, it's been very painful because they have to get used to competing with other foreign agencies. But in that process, I think if they could survive, they'll be better off. They can become stronger, and they can get a market share. And maybe in the future, they can also gain their footprint in the international landscape. So this is necessary.
I agree with you.
They have to do it.
And how many times do we hear SME in the last 2 weeks rather than SOE?
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, I heard SME every speech. I didn't hear SOE. You know, small, medium enterprises, not state-owned enterprises. No. And it's very interesting.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And it's what Xi Jinping has said at the 19th Party Congress, which is essentially the market will be the decider, but the government will intervene when needed. Now, the big question was, do you put the SOEs ahead of the SMEs, or do you put the SMEs ahead of the SOEs? And I think, sorry to use all this, but I think
like
we got the SMEs won this last 2 weeks, don't you think?
It's not about winning or losing, is it? No, I don't think
they definitely got the most attention.
They got the most attention, right? They got the policies, they got the help. I think, yeah, because of course before it was the SOEs, they are dominating, but now they're as we said, because now we need to have a more liberalized market competition. Yeah. That's why the SMEs, we've been talking a lot about. But John, I know you come to China. Well, you came to China for a simple reason.
A simple reason.
So yeah, explain to us. No, because it's not only about the reason. It's because actually I want to ask you about how does your girlfriend see this new foreign investment law? Because she's the reason actually you came here, right?
She has a business in China. It's a UK company, but it's operates mainly in China, and that is, as you say, the main reason I came here 3 or 4 years ago.
For love.
For love.
Can we mention the word love?
Not for for ice cream.
So she came so she came to China for business, and you came here for love. Wow.
Okay, if you want to put it that way.
Love it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, she watching.
Perfect.
Yeah, she's. I think she's pretty encouraged by it. It changes her business because WFIs are getting abolished under this foreign investment law. There's a 5 years to adapt to that. So there's things that it's going to change for foreign companies operating in China now as well. Which I think it's not a huge issue, but it's something which hasn't been a huge amount of attention to. Her business in general hasn't found it difficult to operate in China.
And she's the lucky one. She's the lucky one, right? Because I talk to many.
A man who's good and rich.
I know. Yeah, you're the lucky. Yeah, you're the lucky guy, and she's lucky. No, because I talked to many foreign businesses before. So they have this common idea that shared with me is they think China is easy to enter, but not easy to compete and doing business because they don't quite understand the rule. Yeah. I think this is the beauty of this law, is that not only to invite them, to encourage them, to attract them to come to China, but also to provide this like fair and balanced and transparent market for them to compete, to be able to compete with the Chinese companies.
But it is a
on
difficult market,
footing.
China, and that's what's really interesting. It's like companies who come here and expect to succeed overnight are going to get it wrong.
Well, why do you think, what makes it so hard to compete?
The consumer, the 21st century consumer in China has so many choices. The market changes so quickly.
Like there's so many different flavors of Coke already.
Yeah, no, but from the consumer to internet, to the way people live their lives, to live streaming on YouTube. I mean, you know, the United States, of course, it's still a champion of technology. It's further ahead in lots of ways, but culturally, in the industries of tomorrow, China is far ahead in so many ways. So you get companies coming in thinking, hey, it's a big market, how can I fail? All I need to do is earn $3 per customer, whatever. We can scale this out.
It's not that easy.
But it's not that easy. Ambassador Shui Chiang-kai in DC said, you know, during the recent trade sort of negotiations, said, well, maybe, you know, Western companies should just do their homework a bit more. So it's really interesting. But you find here that Asian companies, Vietnam, India, Thailand, actually do understand the market a little bit more.
Because we have very similar philosophy, similar culture behind that. Or
but I think today in Premier Lee's press conference, he also focused on the business environment, and so that applies to domestic companies as well as foreign companies, and how he acknowledged that China was still falling behind. I mean, he used the specific words, China is still behind in terms of creating a good business environment. So, I mean, that is also part of it. It's not just the foreign investment law. It's actually creating an environment which all companies can prosper in.
Well, but business environment is one thing, but another thing could be demographics. I mean, just now you mentioned that we are millennials, but here in China we don't use that word. We don't call that we have much more specific distinction. We have people born in the 1980s, we have people born in the 1990s, we have people born in the 2000s.
Right. So you do it every 10 years?
Different generations. I mean, actually, I can't even speak to my younger cousin who is slightly a few years younger than me. Yeah, because it's totally going to be a different generation.
Ways of thinking.
So
really?
yeah. You're going to have me reading serious news, and then my cousin, who is slightly younger than me, will be watching Bilibili or Aichi, that sort of thing. So
Baby Shark.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
So, Nathan, if you do your business here in China, you can only be popular among a certain age of viewers because they have so many options.
Right.
So some homework is a lot of work to do, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting. For us as a
so you're saying it as a Chinese person as well, it's very difficult to understand the people even 5-10 years behind you.
I cannot understand people younger than 4 years younger than me.
That's
but
fascinating.
Nathan, you were there today inside the press conference of the Premier, and there was actually one question particular targeting this new foreign investment law, because the reporter asked about whether China rushed through this legislation process just to fend off the complaints from the states. And the Premier says no, and he asked whether China would just talk the talk about opening up without, carrying out tangible results. And the Premier said no again. What was your feedback? What was your impression that time?
I think certain constituencies are going to think one thing and certain constituencies are going to think another. I remember being here at the 19th Party Congress where there was a commitment from, President Xi to do that. I also look at the timing. And we're hearing that a trade deal is close, and one of the big complaints from Trade Representative Lighthizer and that guy Peter Navarro, who wrote that terrible book. Sorry, Peter.
Your friend, right?
Yeah, don't get into it. I cover the White House. So. Anyway, they've sort of been demanding X, Y, and Z, and that language does appear in the foreign investment law. Some, like the Europeans, say, well, perhaps it's been rushed through a little bit too quickly, but they say now at least the timing is good in terms of international attention, and this law will evolve as it merges into domestic investment law. In fact, one of their complaints was they shouldn't call it the foreign domestic law. It should be the foreign investment law. It should be called the investment law, because if you're going to treat foreign and domestic the same, it should apply to all.
Yeah, that's one
so
part of that.
So there's all this to be worked out, and they see a bones, they see a framework, and they want to see the meat on it. And also, what fascinates me is a lot of companies say, look, if you want to do business in Beijing or Shanghai or a first-tier city, it's fine. But it's where China's growth is, where the application of foreign investment laws aren't good. So we're talking about the provinces like Guizhou, where, huge double-digit growth in the provinces, hugely tempting for foreign businesses, but the laws aren't always applied equally across China.
Before.
So this is also a message, some say, and this is Western companies, from Beijing to the provinces to say, hey, you got to do this.
Right.
Really interesting.
Whether you love it or not, you have to do it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of vested interests in the provinces, right?
Exactly.
In Shaanxi, with extraction industries, all this sort of stuff. The same you have in any economy. You're going to have vested interests who don't want everything to change because they've got an advantage at the moment.
I also read some Western reports, media reports about this, the coverage of the foreign investment law. They say, some of them say, still, it's a little bit too vague for them. Right. Without details. But because it's going to turn into effect in 2020, so there's still time for us to release more details to create out more regulations. Why are you laughing, John? Why are you laughing?
I think it's one of those things which is a kind of a split between China and the West in many ways. Like often, Chinese political language is a little vaguer and less specific than you would hear in the West. I think this is just a cultural difference.
But you get used to it now.
I don't know. I feel this is like a UN Security Council resolution, where you've got 15 different constituencies all weighing in on writing a document, and not everyone can agree on everything right away. So the less you agree on, the more vague the language is. And I think that's where we're at, because there are domestic and international concerns.
It's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing.
It's not. We have the gesture.
Because we know this is where we're at right now.
Yeah, and we will have more details released later, but we have to show that we're wanting
from other people. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it will evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the signal is good. The signal has been positively received. and then people are going to be looking out to see what actually happens. And the real test is when companies start being affected by the law, foreign companies particularly, and they report back to their chambers of commerce or their peers or whoever it may be, and say, it's great, it's working, or they don't. And that's going to be when we know if it's been effective or not.
And I just think it's also very timely, regardless of where you think the motives are, because, you know, we are seeing a slowdown in growth in China. We are seeing a slowdown in growth in Europe, Latin America. US has been going really well, but it is also slowing down.
It is.
This is a good way of perhaps restoring the animal spirits, the sort of positiveness when it comes to investment decisions.
Right.
You know, in the largest market in the world, or going to be the
Exactly.
largest market in the world.
And in all fairness, I feel like this is going to be only a basic law, and for that we need basic framework of this. And for the same reason why some arguments, some people are arguing that maybe this should be named investment law. I think in the future, next year, I suppose, we're going to review the law on company, and that's the part where we can have more specific details about how we're going to govern or how we're going to manage foreign investment and Chinese investment, you know, on equal footing, that sort of thing. So it's not going to be more details on maybe this streamlined basic law, but other more specific clause provisions and details will be included in other laws, for instance, the contract law.
Exactly. Well, actually, before we go, I want to show you something. This is, maybe Nathan, you have it too.
I love this.
This is the report. It's the key points for the government work report, because it is a really long document. It's 35 pages. Usually it took, like, for native speakers,
I made a lot of hours.
Right, but starting from this year, it's actually my first. Did you see that before? It's
No,
the first
and
time.
I loved it.
I loved it too.
I read the work report.
Explain
as
to the viewers what is
on.
it.
But, you know, just before you go on air, you remind yourself of all the major points.
Exactly.
Although they've learned from the Americans, right? You leave
Could
stuff
be
out.
from other countries.
You leave some of the points out that maybe people have got disagreements about it.
Right.
I mean, you know, the White House does that all the time. So I just feel that, you know, it's really useful.
Yeah, just to explain to our viewers, this is like the bridge version of the government work report. It has all the key information. If we take a look at the key economic projection.
Figures.
Yeah,
It's a cheat sheet. It's great.
It's a cheat sheet, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great time saver. But the reason that I show you this is China not only talks the talk about opening up, about, you know, making all those improvements. I think the key is about the mindset. And also, after they have this mindset, they are making real concrete steps. And this little brochure, I think, is the very first step for China to showing this willingness. Like, we want the world to know more about us and to have this. It's not only about the positive image. To understand what the real China is, our policies, you know, where this direction is heading to. So I think this is one of the first steps for all of the viewers, for all the countries to understand
and transparency.
China, right?
It shows, you know, instead of the opaque speeches, you know, some people in the West find the language used in Chinese politics difficult because it's Chinese, and also, of course, it's infused with the ideas of socialism and Marxist-Leninism. Now, I studied that at school, but not everyone does. And, you know, the dialectic, the dictatorship of the proletariat, socialism, all this sort of stuff, and the words used are very cumbersome sometimes. So having something like that,
it's good.
Where it's just point after point, you know, 6 to 6.5% growth. Boom. You know, VAT's coming down by 3% here.
It's all the
3 trillion won popped in here. I mean, you know, I've remembered it.
I know. And the
You memorized it.
You memorize it. Okay, what is that? No.
Yeah, what's on page 3?
The weird thing is when I read it, actually there's this popular song that popped out into my head. It's a popular song that we sung during the 2008 Olympics. It's called "Beijing Welcomes You." It's like do you know how to say it?
Don't let me do it.
Go on, please, give me a little bit.
The lyrics goes like
北京欢迎你, like Beijing welcomes
让
you.
歌声感动你，让我们都加油去创造自己. So it's like Beijing welcomes you. So I think this is one of the key messages that we get from this year's 2 sessions,
Well,
right?
that document was very welcome 10 minutes before I had to do a live. Straight after the speech,
know.
I can guarantee you.
So you feel welcome.
Thank you,
and
Beijing.
you feel, and that's one of the changes that benefit you from China's opening up,
Absolutely.
right?
And it's the transparency and the documents in English, and the fact that all the Western media do far more in-depth reporting now, rather than just the opening, it's a rubber stamp, it closes. There's much more in-depth. They're getting the nuance. It's just great.
I know.
I really like the track we're on.
Yeah, we love it all. So thank you so much, gentlemen. As we said, just like this brochure, this is just one of the steps that shows China's willingness and commitments in further opening up. And by opening up, it's not only about just open its doors wider and wider. It's also about, not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk by carrying out the laws, the regulations to make the playfield of business more transparent, more fair, and also, just feel better to make it more welcome for the foreign investors and business, like your girlfriend, right, John?
I hope so, yeah.
So at the very end of our roundtable, I want to share a quote from Premier Li's press conference and what his comment about opening up. Here it goes. The China's opening up measures will not come on a one-time basis. They were introduced quarter by quarter, year after year. And in hindsight, when we review the course of the opening up, we will recognize how much tremendous changes it has brought to the country. So I think that conveys one single message: is China welcomes you. So that's the end of the 5th roundtable. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us, and thank you so much for following us, our viewers. And also, if you're interested in more content on CGTN, you can follow us on all the platforms of CGTN app, CGTN Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Signal Weibo, etc. And also, you can find the live streaming available on the Facebook and Twitter account of CRI, which is called China Plus News. Thank you so much for watching, and good night from Beijing. Bye. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
you. That's a wrap.
That was great. Really,
thank you. Appreciate it, John. Thank you.
What does your girlfriend make or do?
We ask.
We listen. We talk to lawmakers
And average people alike.
We report.
We probe. We interpret the new laws and policies coming out of China's top legislature.
CGTN is fully geared up to offer you a front row seat at the annual sessions of China's top legislative
And advisory bodies, NPC and CPPCC.